I'm a product of racial tension, right? I'm a product of rape. My mom could have easily gotten rid of me.
The wildest part is so many fathers have to figure out how to be fathers that were not fathered.
God, what do you want me to know about being a father? My kids will know who their father is. My wife will be able to depend on her husband because I'm the first father in my family.
What's going on, people? Listen, man, if you hear that means somebody told you y'all talking too much, man, keep it on the low. But tell everybody, though. It's another episode, another installment, unknown. I don't even know what number of a podcast that doesn't exist. I am your host. Maybe I'm not. Who knows? It don't matter. It's BKA Watts, sitting here with a very special guest, the homie, another one of my clients, all at the same time. Y'all need to know him. Good brother, please introduce yourself to the people.
I'm a guest. I'm a guest that nobody knows about. So perfect.
That's cool.
On a podcast that doesn't exist.
That's it.
So I don't exist.
It's going.
Until I get off this podcast. But outside of this podcast, my name is John B. Johnson, founder and principal of a small studio, born and raised in Cleveland, father of two recently.
Congratulations,
and
good brother.
Husband to my wife. And that's a big part of my identity. A small studio is a boutique design studio, just like it's called. We specialize in helping people understand who they are and how to translate that powerfully into the marketplace. And that's my work.
For sure. I feel like you have so many Hollywood components to your life, like so many like Hollywood movie story components to your life. Just in the short time that I've known you, it was noticeable. So, if we can, you come from a mixed race background. So you've had that type of past where you've had internal conflict of growing up and having to navigate who you are and then have to come to the totality of who you are as a man and adult. I assume, you know what I'm saying, that things are great with your wife. You know what I mean? So you've got the good marriage. You've got happiness in the home. You've got a successful business. You now have a boy and a girl. It's like fucking perfect, bro. Then adversity strikes and a medical issue arises that you fight through and come out on the other side. It's like, bro, it seems written.
Let's make a movie.
It's like my man got this. Like you got all the components of a Hollywood movie in your actual life.
Well, thank you for saying that. Thank you for noticing. Thank you for listening. Also,
of course.
I mean, as you say it, I'm like, man, it's hard. It's hard because you said internal conflict. There's also a couple of that with external conflict.
Of course.
Right. As you're going through those transitions internally, there's always things happening externally.
For
right?
sure.
And I even said a while back, I said, I'm a product of racial tension. Right. Because my father actually abused my mother. And not to say the word, but, I'm a product of rape. So you'll add that to that storyline where my mom could have easily gotten rid of me.
Understood.
Right? But she kept me, but I grew up without knowing my father. And then realizing as an adult that that's how I came into this world. It makes me love her even more, right? As a white woman. Right? I was just talking to somebody recently about that and that tension of, especially racial tension, right? Sometimes a lot of people have never had such a loving figure from the opposite from another race,
right.
Especially a race that is so conflicted with, like, white and black. You know what I mean? And so my mom, white woman, took care of me. Made sure I came into this world, made sure I stay alive. Right, still loves me to this day. My wife, a white woman, right, took care of me through that cancer that you talked about. Had my children, right, and is my partner. She's my ride or die.
For sure.
It's that racial tension that juxtaposition of identity as we talked about,
for sure,
of me being Italian and black, right? White and black, and how that's shown up in my life has been freaking hard, man. It's been hard,
bro. I bet.
So I've seen. I thank you that you say it should be a movie, but for me, it's been the best school or best education, best wisdom that I could possibly gain to be a better husband, to be a better father, to be a better leader. You know what I mean? To be a better friend, and hopefully just be more of that light in the world rather than the darkness. And
Absolutely.
I don't think that's something that we don't talk about a lot.
No, bro, it's not. And so, we all got, not we all, because that's crazy, but it feels like so many of us have issues with our fathers, checkered pasts with our fathers, or, different things. And the same applies to me. So, like, my brother and I, my father was dealing with both our mothers at the same time. My mother got pregnant first. And so my brother and I didn't meet until we were teenagers, but we were 9 months apart. And my father swore up and down that that wasn't his child. Until his father, who he had never met, appeared in the picture, just rode his motorcycle into fucking town when we were like 14, 15, and introduced himself to our father. And then our father, I guess his fucking heart grew 3 sizes that day, and he decided, I'm the pappy. You know what I mean? And so it was like, that was a crazy conflict from a perspective of meeting my brother, feeling like we had got robbed of all these years together. And then at the same time, also having our separate conflict of him feeling like he didn't want me. And I had to grow up with no father, where we had him and didn't feel like he wanted us either. And it was, so then for a long time, we had that back and forth of, was it better to have had a father who you felt like didn't really fuck with you versus not having a father at all? Because it's like, if you would have had him, don't feel like it would have been much better. You know what I mean? Like, and that was tough for us to go back and forth with. And there was a point in time where, like, as teenagers, it was just like, bro, like, you ain't even, like, man, y'all had that. And it was like, so? Like, kind of didn't matter. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that shit is tough. And so many of my friends, so many people that look like us have that same thing. And it happens in other races too. But it's just so, it just seems so prevalent with us that shit is tough to deal with. And so, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, that's a great question. Like, is it better to never know your father or to have one that really didn't want anything to do with you?
Right.
And that's a great question. And I mean,
rough.
I mean, I think what's beautiful about just talking about it is that it shares perspective. It gains perspective. I know that for me, never having a father, I wasn't even healed from that trauma.
Going into being a father?
Yeah, I wasn't healed from that until I was in a room with a lot of other men who look like us that also shared that they never knew their father, right? It was just even that question of how many of you in this room had never had a male role model in your life.
Right.
Right. And usually that first male role model is your father.
Should be.
You know, it just should be. And I think that's a beautiful thing to have. But I mean, to put it in perspective, as you were sharing, thank you for sharing that perspective, because that's really all we have is each other's perspective to hopefully gain the wisdom we need to do this thing called life.
Yeah.
As I think about that, I'm like, man, what if I did know my father? You know, to this day, I don't know his name. I don't know where he is. I don't know if he's alive or dead, right?
That's crazy, bro.
And I think about that, and one thing in hindsight, it would have been great to know that guy wasn't my father, or that guy wasn't my father, or that guy wasn't my father. All these men who came around when I was younger, and I'm like, is that my dad?
Right.
I mean, bro, it's crazy to even think about it, because even I went to Madagascar, I think in 2019. I got off the plane and I'm like, man, is my dad from here? Because everybody looked like me,
you, yeah,
right? Like a melting pot
Yeah.
of all these different nationalities, and it was special. I felt at home. But that's to my point. Like, at least you almost knew, and that knowing frees your mind up to focus on other things and say, man, my father is a piece of shit.
For sure.
That's a definitive statement in a way that will allow you to operate however you want to operate. For me, I went through most of my childhood and my teenage years mostly just angry. And honestly, it was mostly like because I was insecure about my identity as a man. I didn't know who I was as a man because I was raised by all females.
Gotcha.
Right? I almost had to gain my confidence from what they looked for in men. So their boyfriends and their friends that they brought around, like, oh, because I love these women that raised me, they probably want me to be like those guys that they love or that they're with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I became an adult I realized, like, that's unhealthy.
Yeah.
John, like, what, you don't need to be like the men that they're with, because those men are trash also, because they never had their father in their life. You know what I mean?
Bro, that's the wildest part, is so many fathers have to figure out how to be fathers that were not fathered. You know what I mean? It's like, bro, like it's tough. And the thing is, it's crazy because my stepfather didn't have his father. His mother, that's just my grandmother. Really, my stepfather is just my father. But her family, disowned her because she got with my uncle's father, who was black, because they're Irish. So I, at the point when my parents divorced, all of a sudden I'm in a blended family with, we got white people over here all of a sudden. It's just like, what the fuck is going on? But he stepped into a place like that's just so crazy that it felt like between my parents' relationship, like the volatility of that, between the pettiness of them not being able to work shit out or shit not going my father's way, and then him saying, well, fuck it, and being able to just have days, weeks, months go by without seeing, talking to, or dealing with us, by comparison to this man who we share none of the same blood, who stepped up in his love for my mother and also didn't have a father himself, but stepped in to be a phenomenal father as a white man to 3 young black men who ain't his. So it's just like, it made me look at choices, and it makes me look at like my mother, who is a semester from having her doctorate, who grew up in the fucking heart of the hood, been through, seen, done everything, and seeing my aunt, her sister, came in the same house, who never left the hood. And does not matter what time of day I call her, I can't catch her sober. And it's just, again, choices. Because it's like a person being like, I'm a product of my environment. It's like, nope, you chose it. Like, you chose that shit. Like, the same way my stepfather chose to be a good father without even knowing what a father looked like. And I think, like, it's the type of person who can go through something and create a manual for it themselves. And it's like, I look at what he did and I look at what my father did, and I say, and I know if I do everything the opposite of what my father did, I'll be a perfect father. That shit is. It was tough to come to that conclusion, but it was necessary to get there at some point.
Yeah, I think based on what you're saying, you said I agree with you. I don't believe in this idea of being a product. I'm a product of my environment. We all have the choice to respond to our environments,
absolutely,
in different ways or in whatever way we feel is necessary. And there's a book out there called it's called Iron John, and it's about the modern man. And in the book, I'll never forget it. I never watch TV the same way or anything. It says that the modern man has been raised by females because of what we're talking about. We have a whole generation, a couple generations now, who have grown up without fathers. And those men who grew up without fathers have a very rough perspective of men. Right. And then those women who grew up raising their kids without fathers have a very rough perspective of what a man is. So, perfect example, Homer Simpson. It says, who's the guy from Family Guy? You look at Married with Children, Al Bundy, all of these shows, especially from the 90s. What was the man in the house? He was incompetent. He was drinking all the time, right? Emotionally unintelligent. Really just
unintelligent, period.
Right? It was just there. And I think that that going back to that question of like, is it better if I didn't know my father, or wasn't there, or he was there? A lot of people have a father, but they don't have a father at the same time.
Yeah.
It's to your point of like, how are these people that have grown up without a father being a father themselves? That was the most scary thing, having my first child. And all I did was pray every single day. God, what do you want me to know about being a father?
Right.
And I was so glad to even be able to pray. I was so glad to be able to even talk to this thing that's not here, but is here. It's like my imaginary friend in God.
For sure.
That filled that void inside of me of not having a father and being fatherless. I went from being fatherless to having a father that was way bigger than any figure could be here on earth, right? In reality. And that's all I did. And I think that's what I would hope to encourage you and everybody else that is going through life with that void sometimes in their heart, is we have a choice to respond appropriately, right? And do we respond out of fear and anger, right? Or do we respond out of love and hope, right? And respond in a way that we would want our kids to respond in a way that we want our mothers to respond, who was abused by our fathers, or our sisters who had children with men who are no longer are in their lives, right? Like how would we want them to respond? Because we can't continue to respond out of almost revenge, and anger, because it just continues. It's cyclical at that point. And what I said for myself, and this is my story, you so eloquently started this whole episode off with it. I said, it stops here.
Yeah.
Period. It stops with me. My kids will know who their father is. My wife will be able to depend on her husband, because I've watched generation after generation. I'm the first father in my family. Multiple generations. I'm the first one. I'm like, it stops with me, and I'm taking a stand for this. And now I'm all right. Here, from this point forward, fatherlessness will not be a part of the story any longer. And that's what got me like amped up. And I'm so grateful that I have the perspective, I think, to speak in that way. And I know that that's a privilege in itself, because I was able to, I think, get away and do a little bit of that reflection, get out of the mess, right? Get out of the drama, get out of all that victim talk of, everybody being mad at everybody else for not knowing any better. It's like,
because that's what it is, though.
That's it.
That's really what it is. And you have to come to a point where you can let that shit go, bro. Because there was a period in time where I was.
Let it go and forgive.
Absolutely. Yeah, there was a period of time where I was angry. Of course, I was angry, bro. Like when I first got to Euclid and started school out there, bro, like I was horrible, bro. Like I was picking on people. I was getting into just miscellaneous altercations with people. I was really like just terrible to be around. And it was because I have to adjust to this new man in my house. I don't know who the fuck he is, where he came from. I don't like him automatically. He ain't my father. All while not even like having it not even clicked yet. They're like, my father's not like, like he's not a fucking shining beacon. Like, but it didn't matter. And it take some real maturing to come to realize like what the fuck is actually going on and to shift your mentality. And bro, eventually as I got to, you know what it really was, bro? I went from constantly angry to really understanding, and then the anger went away. Every other weekend we're supposed to go to our father. Oh yeah, I'm on the way. I'll come get y'all. All right, cool. We waiting. Get dressed, packed up. We standing on the curb. We outside. We ready. He don't show up. The next week doesn't show up. Like excuses, whatever. After so many times that shit happening, eventually I just stopped going out there to wait. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not even gonna pack till he pull up. You know what I mean? And eventually, all right, some of the times he show up, some of the times he don't show up. All right, whatever. But after so many times, and me being rebellious against my stepfather, one of these times he and I get into it, and I posture up at him, get in his face, and essentially threaten like, hey man, I'll get my father on you. And and my stepfather go, I'll never forget, took his glasses off and went, call him. You think he gonna show up? Crushed me, bro. Devastated. Because low key, I knew he wouldn't. And in that moment, I realized I'm fighting the person who is here because I'm upset about the person who isn't.
Yeah.
And man, bro, after that perspective hit me of understanding like this man don't have to be here. He don't have to do this. He don't have to put up with this shit. But he does. And the man who should does not. And it's like, that's just not who he is. And it was like, when I hit that level of understanding, like the anger went away. I just knew that this is just what it is. And I have to let that be what that is. I got to accept it. And now that I know it and I understand it, what's next? Man, kill me with that one.
That's so good, man. When you said, I'm mad at the person who's here because the person, would you say person that's not
because
here
of the person
isn't
who's
showing
not,
up?
yeah.
Like I've since I moved back to Cleveland, about just under 3 years ago. Before I moved back, we were in Seattle, me and my wife, and we knew there's gonna be a battle when we got back home, and mainly I think because of our families. And something I realized since I've been back home, to go with what you just said, is that we spend a lot of time trying to get the people who don't love us to love us.
Yeah.
It's almost like, people want what they can't have in a situation.
Definitely.
Especially when you have been abandoned by somebody that you love.
Yeah.
You end up responding sometimes out of trauma, like you were doing to your stepdad, where at a certain point, it's like, love the people who are here right now.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you end up, we're so caught in the trauma that we end up forgetting to love the people who's right here. Me and my wife have had many conversations where, you know, she's like, man, you would do anything for anybody, John. Like, I want that too. I remember that was a big moment in our marriage where I realized that I was always out trying to serve my community, trying to be there, especially when I started to, you know, build my faith. Right at the beginning, I was always at church. I was involved. I was serving, right? I was
because that's what you feel like you're supposed to do.
That's what, but you know what I realized? At a certain point, I'm like, I remember God really hitting me. John, where's your wife? My wife wasn't at church with me. She didn't want to be there. She didn't feel comfortable there. She didn't feel like she belonged there. I'm like, John, you out here doing all this. You ain't even at home with the one person. You're number one, you know? And I felt like I wasn't even loving the person who was like right here next to me, you know? And then so that moment, I was like, I'm going to church with my wife. We're going to stay home on Sundays. And I'm going to be right there with her. We're going to watch it on TV. You know what I mean? And I think so I really resonate with your story with your stepdad and your biological father, because you know how hard it is to get to that point?
Bruh, absolutely. And like
it's probably one of the hardest things to just see that clearly. Like when your dad took off the glasses and call him.
Yeah, bro. I'm
like that.
What?
That to go back to our just conversation previously, like that is what a father does though. A father helps you see who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
A father is there to help refine and I want to say instill an identity into their children.
Yeah.
Right. A mother is there to nurture. Right. And almost kind of like tend to the garden in a way, make sure that the seed sprouts.
For sure.
You know, water the soil. Father is there to prune that plant. Like, man, you better shut up.
You feel me? Definitely.
Oh, call him.
Yeah.
That's wisdom right there. And that's sometimes the wisdom that punch in the face that we need to realize, man, all that posturing, that was insecurity.
Yeah.
It was a false identity. And that, I think, is literally the sickness that a lot of our generation and even the generations to come who struggle with this fatherlessness. It's not even about not having the father. It's literally we don't know who we are. It's almost a lack of identity. And those false identities are probably the worst thing that's happening to our society right now, because they're grasping at things. I need to know who I am. That's literally human nature, is to understand, have an identity.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so without a father, that's what happened through the war on drugs, right? Putting all those men into prison, breaking up those households. They knew exactly what they were doing, but we're starting to see the effects of that.
Yeah.
Now, in identity, it's not in drugs. It's drugs are happening. It's not in drugs. It's not in violence. It's not in crime.
Right.
All of that right now, it's in identity, and we're seeing that online. And that's what I'm most concerned about right now, is the effects of fatherlessness and how that fatherlessness has caused us to not know who we are. And not have a firm foundation to stand on. Like, I'm about to call my father. Instead of calling that guy who abandoned you, there's somebody else that you could call, honestly. And whatever father you wanted, like for me, like God is my father. And that was the best thing that could have ever happened to me.
Yeah.
That's how I was able to be a better husband. That's how I was able to be a better father, right? All of us have that opportunity to do that, especially when we don't have a father. And I think that's something that we're not talking about enough.
No.
It's like, I'm going to call my father. Yeah, call your father. Take a moment. Close your eyes. Say a prayer. Maybe even take a breath, versus responding out of anger, which is what both of us were doing. And I was doing in high school. I'm fighting every day and day.
Exactly.
Because people were poking at my identity. And I didn't know what it was. I'm like, what do you mean you call me a punk? But right. All they had to do, John, you don't know blank, blank, pop, right? This is how it was. We were so raw in
Right.
that way, and that's what happens when you don't have an identity. Is you literally can be thrown to and fro by any gust of wind.
Yeah, bro. Like having that lack of control of yourself is terrible. And then when you finally get it, when you come to it, if you ever do, which is a whole thing in itself, but getting beyond it and then looking back on those moments, it's like, oh, that shit is horrible, bro. Like that was me at a point.
Well, to put into perspective, I love this conversation, by the way, because I feel like these are the conversations we need to have more of.
Agreed.
You've heard me talk about this book, A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle, I think Kendrick Lamar spoke about him in his last album. He became his guru or whatever, right? Eckhart Tolle's spectacular. In his book, A New Earth, he starts the book off by making the correlation of the fact that we can live here on earth in hell, or we can live in heaven, right? Like, take whatever your beliefs are, get them out of the way. Think about a moment here on earth where you feel like you're in heaven, and a moment here on earth where you feel like you're in hell. And for me, a lot of those times where I all I wanted to do was punch somebody in the face because I didn't know who I was. I was angry, punching walls, like always constantly seeking out fulfillment or appreciation from whoever was willing to give it at any point. I was lost. All right, that was hell for me.
Yeah.
And I remember you saying there was a moment where you were able to just stop being angry in that transition, right? When you were able to just be okay being yourself.
Yeah.
That's heaven.
Yeah.
That peace that comes with being okay with who you are right now.
Yeah.
When you are not okay with who you are, that's hell. That correlation, I feel like is the easiest way for us to operate in this world, is realizing, man, am I operating in hell in my mind, or am I operating in heaven? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was the biggest thing I got out of that book. And he starts it off that way. So I would recommend everybody listening like that, read that book. It changed my whole life.
No, I think it's that exactly. And that's why it's like you find things that resonate with who you are and what you do through your day to day, and you don't realize that you were doing something that existed the whole time. Because in that, like, bro, everybody that knows me at this point know, like, T-Mobile was my last job in 2016. Since then, I've done some like brand ambassador work. I done obviously I'm full-time entertainment. I host, bro, I got like 600 events under my belt since I started hosting, creating events and concepts and all that. When I got back into my art after 8 years, no art at all whatsoever, and just picked up a pencil one day and just drew. And then immediately in posting that, people started offering me money, and I didn't even know what the fuck to charge. You know what I mean? Like, when I took the risk, which was a calculated risk, so please be smart. But like, it was a very calculated risk. When I left that job to say, fuck that shit, I'm not going back to another one. I want to do what I want to do, and stepped fully into that. Bro, my life is like, I couldn't ask for more than this. Like, there was a point when I was doing music when it was like, write the hit song, catches fire, blow up, rich and famous. That was like the 4-step stupid. Like, I learned to define what success is to me, because that's what somebody else's success was. You know what I'm saying? Somebody else wrote the hit song, blew up, rich, famous. That's cool. But that shit come with its own problems too. My success was, I can do this and make a sustainable living off of it. And this and make a sustainable living off of it. Or this and make a sustainable living off of it. Or this. And they were all things that come directly from inside of me, not me having to go do for somebody else and take the crumbs that they give me. For me to be able to say, if I feel like waking up whenever the fuck and just drawing all day, I can. And that makes me super fucking happy. You know what I mean? Because I can do that. And then I can sell that art and I can make a living. I can support my family. I can feed my child from that. And know that what I did to be able to put the food on her plate was a thing that made me happy while I was doing it. And that is all the things that I do now. And I embrace all those things. All those things are about myself, bro, from art to events to podcasting, all of this shit, bro. Like, these are the things I want to do. These are the things that are a part of me. These are the things I'm good at and they make me happy. This is heaven, bro. Like, to your point, like this is heaven for me. And it came from embracing who I am and leaning heavily into the parts of me. And so many other people could see the same success. You know, granted, I'm not in the newest model year fucking car. I'm not in a fucking 10-bedroom mansion. I don't got diamonds all over the place. But nobody in my house is hungry. We don't wonder where meals come from. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not scrambling and scrapping for money. I'm not up against hard times. Like, I am happy.
That's it.
I have the shit that I want. I got an 85 in my basement. I love my man screen. You know what I mean? Like, I am happy, bro. Like, this is, and I didn't have all of this before when I was not living in my gifts, my talents. When I was working a job that was secure, I had a 1-bedroom apartment that I was in for 6 months before I bought a couch. You know what I mean? Like, that's crazy. Yeah. Like, the difference. I felt secure financially, but I wasn't happy and I didn't have shit for real. And taking that risk, I look at what my life is now and what I can continue to make it be. And it's like, damn, I wish I did that shit sooner. And just bet on myself.
Key thing you said for me is find success for yourself.
Yeah. It's definitely different for everybody, bro.
It is.
Because
everybody's different.
Right.
Every single person is different.
So I don't know. Maybe it's social media definitely social media for sure. A large factor of it. But people see people with these extravagant ass things and it's like our hungry eyes. Like, I want that too. It's like.
Well, another thing to go back to Eckhart Tolle, this idea of being present. When you look and compare yourself to other people, you're not present.
Facts.
In yourself. Can't define who you are, define success for yourself if you're not present. Mm-hmm. Right? Well, you're focused on the past or you're focused on the future. It's in that present moment where you really truly can understand, who you are, where you really truly can connect to something bigger, even create. Right? You said that word, like just creating itself. Like that is Julia Cameron in her book, The Artist's Way, she says, creativity is a gift from God, and our way of thanking God is by using it.
Absolutely.
Right? By creating. So we are creative beings, so we got to create.
I got to start reading more of these books, man.
Come on, man. We got to read. We got to read. That's why I like to just share them. Like, these books have shaped me. But your story is spectacular. Once again, people need to hear this because it's not about what success is for Jay-Z.
Right. Because everybody can't have that, bro.
And that is
it's not realistic.
Long time coming.
Like Hove came out in the 90s, bro. Like Hove dropped in the 90s. Jay-Z dropped his first album back then.
Before he dropped his
and
first
everything
album.
Before, right? You know what I mean? And he hit billionaire status a couple years ago. Yeah. It still took 30 years after we heard his name for the first time. Like, stop the comparisons. You're not,
because then you're no longer going to be present. And that's once again that everything is brought to your attention right here. Even just like us creating this episode right now.
Yeah.
Content, media. Take a moment and read a book. Take a moment and just breathe. Mm-hmm. Take a moment and be still and be silent, rather than absorbing all of the things, because all you do is just compare yourself. I was literally talking to my wife yesterday. I'm like, man, every time I go on social media, I either feel like I'm behind I feel like, man, what is going on in the world? Right. And it just takes me away from what you said, which is so wise, I think. Define success for yourself. I can be successful just by being a father.
That's it.
To correlate the whole conversation. If you never had a father in your life and you never knew what a father was, just by being a father, you are successful because you are bettering the next generation.
Exactly.
You are growing from just by being able to provide a meal. If you grew up poor and never had like food on the table, just by being that is success.
Yeah.
So when I work with people and I do my identity architecture workshop, part of when I crafted that workshop was to help people realize that you can live on purpose, right? With purpose, not trying to find your purpose or, be the next big thing in the world, right? Whatever this monolithic thing is, you can just live on purpose today.
Yeah.
If you can just figure out what that purpose can be right now in this moment, for me, it's just having this conversation with you, sharing about these experiences and so on and so forth, like that is enough. And I feel like a lot of the insecurity that we've gained from being fatherless, and I'll say for myself, that I gained from being fatherless was I always felt like I wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
I got taken advantage of because of that. I cut myself short because of that. I had scarcity mindsets because of that. I tried to, make people happy and make people proud. Right? All of that stuff is not good.
Right.
It's insecurity. That's false identities again. Right? Versus I am good enough right now. I am good enough doing whatever I'm doing, even if I'm not making a bunch of money. Or if I'm, not out there in the community, or I'm not going to be mayor or whatever it is. Like I am good enough.
Absolutely.
Right now, just being able to say that.
Yeah.
Is hard for a lot of people.
It is.
And that's the beauty. Like when you can say I am good enough and truly believe it, that's peace.
Yeah.
Peace.
Man.
It's a hard thing to come by.
It is. It is.
Especially today.
Absolutely. My father and I could say that I forgave my father and got over the shit a long time ago, but I wasn't necessarily 1,000% sure. And I know the type of music he liked, like old school player shit, South shit, Ghetto Boys, all that shit. And my father and I ain't never done nothing together, ever. The only things we've ever done together has been shit where it was his weekend with us and he'd pick us up and he would literally take us to the dollar movies, give us $20 worth of quarters and just let us go crazy in the arcade section. That wasn't fucking parenting. It was just they out my face for the next couple hours. Shit, I realized, you realize but we never did anything to bond. It did not exist. And if we did other shit, it was always just I realized just the shit that he was interested in. It was car show this weekend. He's a mechanic, by the way. So all he give a fuck about is cars since before I was born. Car show. Okay, sure. Shit like that. I hosted Scarface's concert. We don't get along. But another concert, he came to town. I used my connections, was able to get tickets. I reached out to my father and we went to the concert. I took him. He had the fucking time of his life. And I thought that maybe, just maybe, that would be the beginning of us maybe starting, something. Right back to normal after that night. And it was just bro, it was at that moment that I realized I am okay with this the way it is because that is just who he is. And this is all that this will ever be. And I accepted that shit in that moment. And it was and I was really able to come to acceptance with it because I realized that I had genuinely reached out and did something for him and for us to be able to just get a connection point. And ultimately it felt like it didn't mean shit to him. And it was okay, I can have peace knowing that I did try though. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's okay.
It's okay.
You know what I mean? So, y'all just gotta. I would give y'all the same advice that the homies gave me. Is, bro, like, with these people, it don't hurt to try, but you also got to be okay with accepting things for what they are and how they are.
And that's, I think, you should never do something with the expectation of getting something back.
Right.
That's I think that's so important, because that's where the insecurity comes from. You do something, I'm doing this because I want you to love me, versus I'm doing this because I feel like it's necessary. And I feel like that's what I'm supposed to do as John, right? Or as Watts. Not because I want them to love me, because if they don't love me, it wasn't a waste. It just is what it is. And that's how you can be emotionally stable and not relying on others for your emotions and for your identity.
Right.
Yeah.
And listen, and I know my father loves all of us. He's just not a father, bro. It's not what he wanted. It's not what he wanted. And it's just like, all right.
Well, the best piece I got about my parents, or parents in general, was I did a workshop in Phoenix. I was doing a lot of growth after I left Cleveland, personal growth, and they said, what if your parents just didn't know better? What if that person who cut you off on the way here just didn't know better? And I feel like that's some grace that you can give sometimes, even if you know for a fact they knew better. Like, man, they just don't know better.
Right.
And that's okay. I'm going to give that grace, and I'm going to move on. I'm not going to carry their ignorance on my shoulder for life. I'm not going to carry their expectations on my shoulder. I'm not going to carry their I want to say the traumas that I've experienced. I'm not carrying. Get off me.
Right.
Right. That's where grace comes in. That word grace. I named my daughter. Her middle name is Grace, because grace is something that somebody doesn't necessarily deserve, but you give it to them anyways.
Right.
Right. Like, maybe we don't necessarily deserve to have peace. Right. But to have grace with ourselves is something that's important. To have grace with others is something that's important. I feel like grace leads to peace, but anger and resentment and carrying all that stuff on your shoulders, like, that's not peace. That's hell.
Ah, man, yeah, you're right.
So
you're right.
I love that, man. I once again, you know what? I wanted to say this because as we're just going through this and just on this episode, and the idea of it being a podcast that doesn't exist. After this conversation, these are the conversations that don't exist.
Facts.
These are the things that two black men don't normally talk about. You wouldn't find two black men talking about their fatherlessness on social media right now.
Exactly.
I guarantee it would be very hard to find that. So thank you for doing it. Thank you for producing it. Thank you for caring enough to have a conversation like this. Thank you for having me on.
No, thank you. Thank you for coming on, bro. This was great. I had an idea where the conversation could go, but I don't know, man. I feel like we got a good enough connection to sit down and just let it.
Gotta let it go.
You know what I mean? So yeah, I definitely want to have you come back on, bro, and we can on the next one talk about, like I said, talk about business, talk about what we do, talk about balancing our lives.
Nobody needs another scripted podcast. Right?
Nah.
So let it flow, man.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think that it is. That we will have two different perspectives on balance while running our businesses, and I think that's why I feel like that's a good one that we can, we ain't got to script it, but we can talk about it, and because I'm interested in your perspective and also really learning how you make it work, because I know you do, and sometimes I don't. So hey, you know what I'm saying, it'd be advice for me, but. I know that we both got things that we can offer each other and offer to the people, man. But I appreciate you coming on, bro.
All right, homie. Appreciate you.
All right, man. Listen, that is going to wrap it up for another one of these things, bro. It's unknown. Keep it on the low, but tell somebody, though. It's another episode of a podcast that doesn't exist. I am BKA, bald, knowledgeable as Watts, sitting here with my man,
John B. Johnson.
Yeah. Make sure y'all following BKA Watts pretty much everywhere, and follow John B Creating. Also follow A Small Studio. Tap in, tune in, see what my man got going on. Get your identity architectured. Okay, I'll catch y'all on the next one.
Peace.